Have you ever witnessed a family disintegrate before your very eyes? Not gradually, not in secret, but in public, with cameras rolling on every strained smile and cringe-worthy silence while the reality leaks in between. That's precisely what we've seen happen with the Brown family on Sister Wives. What began as a tight, spiritually based home where 4 women lived with one husband and raised their children in a communal manner has now broken apart into a chaos of distrust, loneliness, and deep emotional wounds. Somehow, regardless of how crazy things become, one person always manages to emerge victorious. If you've been reading this story, you likely saw the cracks beginning to form long before Christine chose to leave. But now it's all out in the open. The disguise of unity is gone, and what remains is a painful, raw reality. This isn't TV drama. This is about playing favorites, manipulating, emotional abuse, and insidious takeover which left everyone else in its rearview mirror. What we witnessed wasn't entirely for television viewers. It was something more fundamental, something one can recognize that happens if and when one watches family ties dismantle. Even though not necessarily in this manner openly, when Robin came to the Brown family, she came with sweet smiles, teary eyes, and a peaceful, humble demeanor. Initially, it appeared genuine, but Cody's response to her was instantaneous and ardent. As soon as he laid eyes on her, nothing else mattered. And there, in that moment, it was apparent something significant was going to change. They had spent years juggling family life, raising kids, paying the bills, and keeping it all together. But then Robin came along, and it was a whole different ballgame. Cody wasn't just curious, he was smitten. And when some new person walks into a formed dynamic and right away becomes the focal point, it leaves all the rest standing on the outside looking in. Resentment creeps up, tensions rise. The individuals who constructed the foundation of that family began to feel forgotten. That's precisely what's occurred here. With time, Robin's meek nature developed into subtle manipulation. What at first seemed innocent niceness was something else entirely: control, unspoken power, and an incremental tilt in the family's emotional equilibrium. The other wives were confronted with growing distance, overt favoritism, and a husband whose allegiance and presence were no longer evenly divided. But the true problem wasn't merely Robin and Cody's relationship. It was about what it uncovered in the entire family. The simmering issues, the unleashed egos, the shattered trust, they all came to the surface. And the excruciating price of keeping up appearances became too much to overlook. What was unfolding on screen was more than the disintegration of a family. It was a lesson in what occurs when individuals refuse to face issues for too long. When appearances are more important than honesty, and when someone takes power quietly while others are too drained to struggle against it. Robin didn't just become part of the Brown family. She came like the ideal, tailor-made solution to all of Cody's emotional issues. Whenever Cody had a problem, Robin was there with tears in her eyes, but her tears always somehow seemed to be aimed at Cody. Every moment of difficulty became a chance for her to emerge fragile, misunderstood, and needing to be defended. And it worked because Cody wasn't looking for another companion. He was yearning for reassurance, and Robin provided him with it with no hesitation. And then there was the lawfully wedded marriage. Legally speaking, it was performed as a pretense to adopt Robin's kids. But come on, that single choice immediately reversed the family power dynamic. After that, everything else started revolving around Robin. Decisions that were once a group effort silently began getting made behind closed doors, with Cody at the helm, but anyone who listened could tell whose voice he was echoing. And though Robin loudly professed she never wanted to be the favorite, her actions told a whole different story. The other wives? They became increasingly backgrounded. Christine, the heart and comedy of the family for so long, appeared to lose the spark that had made her sparkle so highly in the initial seasons. Janelle, the consistent and level-headed one, looked increasingly alone, like a house guest in her own household. And Mary, her muteness was a testimony against her greater than any statement ever might be. Individual by individual, they began questioning where they stood within the family, while Robin's role continued to become more secure. It wasn't done vocally or in grand declarations. It was low-key, persistent, and constant. An incremental, measured realignment of emotional allegiance and power. And here's where it gets even more disturbing. Robin and Cody's house quietly became the unofficial headquarters, the one residence where everything seemed normal, ordered, and curiously exclusive. It was not a location where the other children or wives could simply visit. There were hidden rules, unseen fences, and requirements to be fulfilled. And let me be clear, it wasn't Cody dictating those terms. It was Robin, as much a mother as she was the unobtrusive gatekeeper to Cody's affection. In fact, Robin knew precisely what she was doing. She didn't merely play the game, she dominated it. Robin played the game all right, but she played it to win. She refined the art of seeming pleasant and cooperative while systematically remolding the entire family into her own shape and mold. When it served her purposes, she relied on church doctrine, emphasizing obedience and doing things the right way, which, naturally enough, always came out to protect her interests. While that, the rest of the family was in a perpetual state of responding, constantly adapting, constantly defending, a step behind a new family form they never had any consensus over, but were already occupying. And poof, Robin was not just the latest wife anymore. She became the focal point of it all. Not through screaming demands, but by taking care that gradually everything centered around her. And if you don't believe me, go look at those early Sister Wives seasons. Then, Cody Brown resembled a man in overdrive, attempting to be all things to all people. He was running nonstop, hauling groceries, lugging babies, dashing from house to house. For a few years, it really did seem like he was doing his best. But along the way, somewhere between Robin's arrival and the move to Flagstaff, that version of Cody vanished. In his stead was someone emotionally distant, combative, short-fused, and surprisingly picky about which of his wives and kids he showed up for. And you didn't even need a narrator to know where his priorities were. It was plain as day on the screen. Robin's kids, particularly Aurora and Brianna, were the beneficiaries of his sole attention. They received the visits on schedule, the sit-downs for heart-to-hearts, the security of a stable home life. Gabe and Garrison, Janelle's boys, once never to be parted from their dad, were left out in the cold. Gradually, they became surrogates for all things Cody did not wish to face. Uncomfortable discussions, queries into fairness, and responsibility for shattered promises. And let's be realistic. The feud between Cody and his sons did not suddenly exist. It was there, burning beneath the surface for years. But during the pandemic, everything came unraveled. Cody imposed a regime of strict, peculiarly specific regulations that, let's face it, looked designed to drive everyone apart, except for Robin's family. Gabe and Garrison were told to sacrifice everything, their social lives, their jobs, their friends, all of it, for the slight possibility of perhaps catching a glimpse of their father, if and when Robin deemed it safe. And when those boys did not do as they were told, Cody withdrew. He ceased visiting, called them disrespectful, and in a span of seconds, ceased being their father. One of the toughest things to watch were the scenes with Garrison. You could see the hurt on his face, this kid wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard. And instead of hearing him, Cody wrote it off as rebellion. He lectured the cameras that his sons owed him an apology. He never once paused to realize that perhaps he was the one who was wrong. Not once did he utter the words, "I made a mistake." That shattered something, not only between a father and his boys, but within the viewers too. What was evident was that it wasn't a matter of poor communication. This was emotional abandonment unfolding right before us. And then came one of the most heartbreaking moments of the entire series, when Gabe recounted quietly how his father had forgotten his birthday. Not just forgotten it either. Cody actually called him on that day, unaware of the significance. The quiet that followed Gabe's telling that story, the blank expression in his eyes, wasn't disappointment. It was grief. Grief for someone very much alive, yet who had long since checked out emotionally. And all the while, Robin's kids were untouched by the blowback. They weren't being shoved away. They weren't being called disrespectful. They weren't being left out in the cold. They were still getting Cody's attention, his visits, and his affection. The disparity in the way the families were treated was glaring. What transpired wasn't merely favoritism. It was something much more severe. Emotional neglect in the guise of discipline. Cody gradually ceased to be the father to a whole family and became the guardian of one home, leaving the others behind to face the silence, the rejection, and the pain of a father who was absent. If you listen to what Robin Brown says over the course of the seasons, you'll pick up on something subtle. And really, it's sort of brilliant in how deliberate it is. She hardly ever makes herself the one in control. She's not the problem solver, not the source of the issue. She's always the misunderstood one, the one begging for peace, the one who's always on the brink of tears about how hard everything is. But beneath that gentle, shaking voice is a long, consistent trend of quietly reconfiguring the family dynamic to suit herself, while maintaining she's just attempting to keep the family afloat. Those breakdowns in the confessionals are impossible to forget. The voice shakes, the face contorts, but no actual tears are ever shed. All vulnerability presented with no follow-through. And look, nobody's around to tell someone their feelings are not real. But when it occurs by the clock, every time she gets questioned, or every time Cody gets criticized, it begins to feel less like genuine emotion and more like a strategy. Because every time Robin cries, the discussion somehow changes. Suddenly, it's no longer about responsibility anymore. It's about how difficult this is for her. She's recited the same lines for years. I just want the family to be close again. I just want us to live our faith the right way. Initially, those phrases seem genuine, even admirable. But juxtapose them with her behavior, and a different picture emerges. Consider the relocation to Flagstaff, for instance. Robin was the final one to go along with it, the final one to pack, and somehow, against all probability, the only one who ended up in a spacious, ready-to-move-in rental. Meanwhile, the other wives were left scrambling. Christine and Janelle had no idea where they'd be staying, and Mary, as usual, was barely included in the discussion. And Cody? Cody was basically living at Robin's house before the moving trucks even left. So how did the one wife who said she was reluctant end up with the easiest, most convenient arrangement? You tell me. Then there was the entire debacle with the Coyote Pass land split. That meeting when all the wives got together and hashed out how the property would be divided. And somehow, as if it were predestined, Robin and Cody already had something planned. 4 acres for Robin, 4 for Janelle, 4 for Mary. Christine would take whatever was left, if anything. Robin sat there, protesting she didn't want any special treatment. She insisted she just wanted everything to be equal. But true equality would have required Mary to receive her equal portion too. And yet, things happened. Robin did not insist. She did not protest. She kept quiet, playing dumb as if she did not have any say while quietly profiting from a scheme that favored her totally. And it wasn't about land alone. When Mary was still clinging on, desperate to remain attached to the family, showing up, being loyal, hoping for recognition, Robin would go on making these warm, mushy statements in front of the camera. She'd say, I want to get closer to her. She vowed to reach out, to forge that connection. And then, nothing. No follow-up, no phone calls, no real relationship. It was a habit. Say what needs to be said for the cameras, look good in unison, but allow the vow to quietly lapse when the scene wrapped. It was never about true connection. It was about image. Over the years, Robin has carefully built a persona. She presents herself as the peacemaker, the loyal wife, the one holding the family together. But episode after episode, season after season, what we've actually seen is someone subtly positioning herself at the center of everything. She always ends up safe. She always ends up favored. And when anyone dares to question it, the tears appear. The victim mask slides on, and suddenly, Robin is the one under attack. She doesn't scream. She doesn't order her around. That's not how her authority functions. It's subtle tactics, it's constant pressure, and it's immensely profound. But Robin's influence isn't gained through shouting. It's gained through subtlety, masquerading as collaboration. And it's through that gentle manipulation that the whole Brown family dynamic was reshaped incrementally around her. By the time the marriages actually fell apart, the warning signs had been present for years. The Brown family, once touted as a symbol of plural marriage, unity, faith, and mutual love, had quietly fallen apart. And it wasn't due to lawsuits or scandals or public outcry. It was internal. It was emotional. It was neglect, favoritism, and the deliberate, consistent elevation of one wife over the others. Christine walked away first, and when she did, it was like thunderclapping. But what made the blow so tragic was how long she had clung, how desperately she had fought to be important. All those years, she had swallowed her hurt, brought up her kids solo for the most part, and seen Cody give Robin and her children his time, his love, and his energy. She was the smiling wife who endured rejection, the faithful one who remained steadfast in the face of indifference. And ultimately, she realized that loyalty and love aren't exactly synonymous. She didn't leave because she fell out of love with Cody, but because she finally realized he fell out of love with her years ago. Janelle did too. In some respects, her breaking point was all the more tragic. She was always the stable one, the practical one. She didn't require grand gestures, simply ordinary respect. But when her sons, Gabe and Garrison, were benched by Cody during the pandemic, she noticed what many people already saw. Cody had ceased to be a father to anyone outside Robin's family. The manner in which he shut down his sons' emotions, gaslighted their realities, and blamed Janelle for supporting them was the tipping point. Janelle, recognizing what healthy boundaries look like, decided to take a walk. And then there is Mary, the original first wife. She had already lived through the catfishing scandal, the emotional coldness, the public shaming. She hung in there, hoping, waiting, grasping for whatever crumbs of contact Cody would share. But in the end, what did she get? Coldness, passive aggression, and indifference so profound that even Robin couldn't rationalize it anymore. When Mary finally made the announcement that she was done, it wasn't loud and dramatic. It was quiet, dignified, and it was long overdue. So where are Cody and Robin now? Together, but not together, not triumphant. They're sitting in the ruins of the family they said they were trying to save. All that control, all that manipulation, and now it's just the two of them. But even that doesn't look solid. If you observe Robin during the tell-alls, watch her body language. She once huddled against Cody with pride, always the obedient wife. Nowadays, her shoulders are rigid, her face taut. Joy does not abound in being the sole survivor where all others have abandoned ship. And the pretense of perfect wife? That's cracking as well. She weeps to be reunited with the family. But where was that passion when it would have worked? She remained quiet when Christine was suffering, never battled for Gabe or Garrison, and permitted Mary to be overshadowed. Now she weeps before the cameras, but not before the family. The facade of togetherness is destroyed. The Brown family is no longer a family, at least not as they attempted to market it. And Cody and Robin have been left with the reality they helped forge. It was never unity. It was control. Now that there is no longer anyone to control, they must face what's actually there between them, or what isn't. Seeing this entire thing come undone, not only as a fan, but as a human, is genuinely heartbreaking. What went down in the Brown family wasn't merely television drama. It's representative of something very real. Favoritism, manipulation, emotional neglect, these are the things that destroy actual families daily. When you see it in a family that once professed to be based on love, faith, and harmony, it just cuts differently. What hurts the most is seeing how hard the other wives attempted. They kept hoping that if they worked harder, remained quieter, or were more loyal, they'd finally be important again. But nothing was different. The more they gave, the more they vanished. All along, Robin was smooth and tearful, always just misunderstood enough to escape blame, always weeping, always telling them she wanted peace. But peace never arrived. Not for the other wives, not for the children who were left in the cold. Only Robin enjoyed that peace of mind because ultimately, she received exactly what she had wanted, Cody to herself. It almost seems like you're talking about a dive into the show Sister Wives and how the wives interact with Cody. From the way you have written it, you are drawing attention to tension, manipulation, and how the audience views what has been transpiring in the background. The concept of Robin possibly being the victim and maybe having strings to pull is an intriguing one, and it causes the reader to wonder about how authentic the narrative they are presented with is. It sounds like you're wondering if Robin's positioning within the family has been more calculated than we've been instructed to think. Whether she's actually innocent, as she sometimes pretends to be, or whether she's been quietly manipulating things from behind the scenes. There's certainly an aspect of, were we watching a love story or a takeover, in how the show has been construed over time. Is this the type of analysis you're thinking of bringing to your YouTube channel? It sounds like content that digs deep into the motivations and true dynamics of characters, which could really resonate with an audience.